as TN. Just think of a T and N.
Okay. Okay. All right, Ashley and Tian, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over my presentation, and if you have any questions, you write them down and you can ask them at the end of the presentation. All right, so let me go ahead and get started here. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you here. Let's see here, I want that one. And that should be that one. There we go. Okay, does everyone see a purple slide in front of you right now?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So, whenever most people think of the United Kingdom, there's a lot of things they think of. First of all, driving on the wrong side of the road, or maybe the lions at Trafalgar Square. Of course, I'll think of the Union Jack, which actually right now with Scotland pressing for independence, who knows how much longer the Union Jack will actually be around, but that's something people think about. They think about the changing of the guard. But of course, most people, they always think of the Queen. This particular CCE is named Kings, Knights, and Bishops, and what we're doing is we're studying the British tradition. All right, so it's a 13-day study of the British tradition, and particularly the role of the monarch in it. What is the British tradition is one of the questions we'd be asking, and how has this impacted British culture both in the past and today?
Professor Celsor, sorry to interrupt
Yes.
you. I think unfortunately the screen that you have shared is just showing it before you hit the present button. So I think what you did was share a particular screen and not like the entire screen, because we're still like on slide 1 in the regular PowerPoint look.
Oh.
So you can either maybe go out and reshare, that might help.
Okay. Actually, let me try this instead, because I've had trouble. Some other students have mentioned that as well. Let me try something else here. Right now, do you see that a regular, the original screen they had the 2 pictures on it?
So the screen that you're on right now is the screen that's showing.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you see one now with a British flag on it and the Union?
Yep.
Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm not going to actually show the slideshow. I'm just going to advance it slide by slide because I've noticed there have been problems with this.
Yeah, that works perfectly.
So thanks for pointing it out. All right. Yeah. So you've already heard, my opening here. Most people, they always think of the Queen. This particular CCE is called Kings, Knights, and Bishops. It's a 13-day study of the British tradition and particularly the role of the monarch in it. What's the British tradition and how has it impacted British culture, both in the past and today? And so we're going to begin our study in London, touring and asking experts questions about, first, Windsor Castle. How does this castle actually enhance the power of the monarchy? When you go in the castle, the thing that really reminds me, or the thing that really is striking about touring Windsor Castle is the fact that it's really a home field advantage for the monarch, because you get to see, the splendor, of the monarchy. The rooms are magnificently decorated. I mean, the one right in the middle is called the Waterloo Room, and it's named in celebration of the general who beat Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. It's a magnificent room with wonderful paintings on it, showing you sort of the history of Britain. So Windsor Castle really ends up being, kind of a home field advantage. So we're going to be looking at Windsor Castle, trying to figure out how does this castle enhance the power of the monarch. We'll also take a look at Westminster Abbey. Does religion, have a role to play in the monarchy? I mean, a lot of students, whenever they go into Westminster Abbey, they're kind of surprised. They expect a nice, quiet church. Westminster Abbey is far from being a nice, quiet church. It's the attic, as I call it, the attic of British history. It's just a magnificent abbey. It's not actually called a cathedral, although it's the size of a cathedral because there's no bishop who has a chair there. It's controlled purely by the Queen. But it's a wonderful place to really look at British history and see how religion helps to establish the monarch. We'll also talk to people from the British Monarchist Society, talk more about the role of the monarchy in Britain's past and the future. We'll also talk to a member of parliament about governance of the governance of the nation, current issues important to Britons, and the role of the Queen in the government today. But you know, going to London is more than just studying and looking at, the monarchy and all these wonderful, looking at the wonderful history. London today is a vibrant city. It's really, really fun. You get a sense of what life is like today in London. We'll get to ride the tube. The tube actually, while we're in London, is our major source of transportation. And the picture there that's on the right, you kind of get a sense of what the tube is like. It's pretty clean, actually. If some of you have ridden subways in other cities like New York, you think of them as being dirty. The tube in London is quite clean. Some stations are a little older. The picture I have here was taken at Baker Street. Some of the others, like Westminster, are brand new. The picture on the left there shows kind of what it's like to be in the tube, during rush hour. There's people everywhere. So, I mean, it's a really fun experience. We'll get to speak with Muslims who live in London today about how they get along, how they live. We'll take a tour of what's known as the Central Islamic Mosque. You can see it in the background there of that one picture. We'll stay in an old townhouse, kind of get to see how people lived in Britain. Would have been, the late 19th, early 20th century. If you like stairs, you would love these townhouses. They're 4 stories tall with stairs everywhere. Many of them today, like the one we'll be staying at, have been converted to high-end hostels. And so, I mean, it's a nice place to stay. It's a quiet street, but still pretty close to everything. So it's a nice place to stay, but it's in an old townhouse. We will eat at ethnic restaurants. There are restaurants everywhere. And there's about every kind of ethnicity you can think of. There is Middle Eastern, there's Indian, there's various forms of Chinese, Vietnamese, Polish. I mean, you name it, it's out there. And so we'll eat a lot of these restaurants and get a sense of the food that they eat. We'll take in a play at the Globe Theatre, find out what England used to be like many, many years ago. And of course, you'll get some time to explore the city in your free time. The picture on the left there, that is St. Paul's Cathedral. I mean, every time I'm in London, I want to see St. Paul's. It's really a magnificent cathedral. Of course, there's Buckingham Palace on the right. Unfortunately, you can't tour Buckingham Palace. That's only during the month of July, so we'll be there just a little early for that. And of course, the picture on the bottom is one of my former classes at the Tower of London. You can take in the tower. See, the thing is, though, that the UK is more than just London. So after 7 days in London, we'll take a high-speed train. Not exactly this one. This is Queen Victoria's train, actually. This one. And we will take this to Durham and Newcastle in North England, because the UK is a very different place in the north of the country than in the south. It was harder. It was poorer. Why? We're going to find out by touring and talking to experts on Durham Cathedral, Durham Castle, and the Archaeological Museum of Durham. We'll also speak to people from the Labour Party while we're there and find out the concerns of people in North England. It's very different than the South. We'll also engage in a service learning project in Newcastle to get to understand the people better there. But finally, we'll end up in Edinburgh, Scotland. Everybody loves Scotland. It's really fun. London is, you got old buildings, you got old institutions in London, but London is a modern city. It's bustling. London is fun. If you want to feel what old world Britain is like, go to Edinburgh. It feels old. Culturally, the Scots are very different from the English, and yet they formed one nation with them. Why? They've got a different image of kingship than the English. Edinburgh, believe it or not, was the birthplace of modern democracy. So we Americans owe them a lot. Why did democracy grow up in Edinburgh, in Scotland, not in England? And we'll get the answers to these questions as we take the Edinburgh Democracy Tour. It's about a 2-hour walk all throughout what's known as the Royal Mile, up from Edinburgh Castle all the way down to Holyrood Palace. It's a fascinating tour. It's a fascinating discussion. We'll walk on the Royal Mile, as I said, and that's a picture looking up into the Royal Mile, up towards the castle. We'll begin with the castle up from the top. We'll go to St. Giles Cathedral. For those of you who know a little bit about British history, this is where the British Civil Wars in the 1640s started. They started at St. Giles Cathedral, when the bishop there tried to impose the English prayer book on the Scots, and they were absolutely outraged. Some of the women actually picked up their stools and threw them at the clergy. That was the start of the war. It started right there in Edinburgh. And then here's the Palace of Holyrood. We'll tour medieval closes. I mean, some of you, love Harry Potter, and you get to see the scenes where, they're in the old London. Actually, the old town London that they show in Harry Potter is actually closer to Edinburgh. They've got these medieval closes, these very narrow covered walkways between buildings. And they lead to private courts, great places for sedition to grow. We'll even tour creepy graveyards as we're told the story of democracy. And like I said, if you ever wonder where J.K. Rowling got her inspiration for Harry Potter, it's right here in Edinburgh. We will also take a look at Calton Hill. It's a memorial of those who fought for justice in Scotland. We'll talk with a craftsman in Edinburgh to find out what it's like to live in Edinburgh, Scotland today, and how they're different from the English. What's their take on Brexit? The class itself is scheduled to go to the UK in May 2022, just after finals, so it'd be from early to mid-May. The budget is set at $39.50. You can see the brochure for more details. Let me say this. I had a question via email from a student earlier today asking about the current cost for this particular CCE. The cost is set at $39.50, and I am dedicated to maintaining that cost. The problem is that at this point in time, I cannot give you an accurate breakdown on how much things are going to cost from the standpoint of actual expenses, because with COVID, everything is up in the air. But here's what you need to know about the budget. I am dedicated to seeing the $39.50 budget hold. And if that means we have to cut out a few things because things perhaps will be more expensive after the pandemic, I hope not. I don't know that they will be. I don't know if there's good reason for thinking they will be, but who knows at this point. If they are, though, I'm dedicated to that $39.50 figure, finding some way to get it to work. So that's what you plan for. So let me just say that if you want to understand British culture better and the role of the monarchy in their lives, then this is your class. And on top of that, one of the things I think that's another reason that this class is important is the fact that if you understand British culture, I think you'll understand American culture that much better. Because American culture, to a large extent, grew out of disputes with the British. And so if you understand the background for these disputes, I think you can understand us just a little bit better. Disclaimers, the itinerary was established prior to the outbreak of COVID-19. Some modifications may have to be made depending on availability, but I'm going to try to maintain this itinerary to the best of my ability and maintain the cost because I don't want it to go over $39.50. One other thing I do need to add, we are in the process of creating a second CCE to go to the UK as well. It'll also begin in London. We will also take a look at the British monarchy. So we'd also be touring Westminster Abbey, taking a look at Windsor Castle. But it's also, though, going to be focused on understanding community. And I think this is an interesting take on a CCE to the UK because the British are understood to be the most heavily socialized people in Europe. And by socialized, I don't mean an economic system. I mean because they've got such a small land mass and a fairly large population for such a small area, they've had to learn how to get along with each other much better than say, other nations. And so they're heavily socialized. They learn how to get along with people. And so if you're going to study community and find out how the society is structured, I think it makes for a very good topic for a CCE study. And so while we'll be taking a look at the monarch in this our additional alternative CCE, we'll also be taking additional trips, one down to Canterbury, one up to Norwich, and another one to Coventry. I think that CCE would be just as enjoyable, but keep in mind the alternative is focused primarily around London. That one would not be going to Scotland. And at this point, I'm not certain exactly whether that CCE will be going in the summer of 2022 or this one that I've just talked to you about will be going in summer of 2022 as well. I'll let you know very shortly, but I did want to alert you to that possibility so that you're not surprised. I think that's everything I needed to talk about at this point. So let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Let's see here. Take care of that. Thank you. Let's see here. I guess that's it. All right. Do I have any questions at this point?
I actually have a question for Taylor.
Yep, go ahead.
Are the class days and times out for the fall semester and spring semester?
The dates and times are only out for fall semester currently. I know there's one course that's missing a time because a professor is waiting. There are no course times out for spring of 2022 yet.
Okay, thank you.
Now, let me ask you, when you talk about course times, are you talking about the times during the semester when the course would meet for its preparatory information, or when we would actually travel to the UK?
The time we'd meet during the semester.
Okay, let me tell you this. This is just a general rule. For me in my classes, I find it works best to hold my classes on a late Tuesday or Thursday afternoon. So right now, my class is held from 3 to 4:50 on Thursdays. I have a tendency to stick with that particular time slot for my CCE. So there's a good chance that's when this particular CCE would be held. I'm not going to guarantee it. Something may happen, it may change, but there's a good chance it'll be around that time. Any questions? Okay, well, I think I covered everything I needed to cover, Taylor.
Yeah, it was a great overview of, everything that you guys do. I guess my last question would be, what is your favorite part?
Oh, that's a good question. It's probably Westminster Abbey. I mean, I love going to the Abbey every time I'm there, although I have to say I had an unusual cultural experience myself the last time we went there in 2019. I had a student, the first time I've ever had a student come down with what we thought was the flu or strep throat. And so I actually took her to the NHS, the National Health Service. Oh my goodness. The standards that they have there are very different than our standards. I mean, when we go to the doctor's office, it's usually nice carpeted floors, it's comfortable, upholstered chairs. You go up to the window and you talk to a pleasant secretary, and usually a nurse will come back and get you and take you to the examining room. Oh no, nothing like this. I felt like I was in an industrial plant. I mean, first of all, we went to 2 different buildings, had to go to triage, talk to someone at the emergency room, said, all right, fine, from what you've told us, you can go to the NHS. So she sent us over to the urgent care center. The urgent care center had nothing more than just a plain linoleum floor, plastic chairs that were not comfortable, and a secretary who had no idea what he was doing. And the doors were constantly opening in that thing. It was an automatic door, but I watched them take 45 minutes to try to fix it, and it was never fixed. While the student was going to the doctor, I decided to use the washroom, which was not exactly up to American standards. It was a very different experience, I have to say. So yes, I love Westminster Abbey, but I didn't get to see it last time. I got my own.
You got to experience healthcare in the UK.
Yes, very different. I mean, from what I understand, the healthcare standards themselves are comparable. British medicine is just as well developed as the United States. So if I were to get ill in the UK, I would have no trouble going to the NHS. But I have to say, all the little excuse me, the frills and things that make it so nice and pleasant to go to the doctor in the US were just completely missing in the UK. It was a no frills exercise.
It's very interesting. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never know. But yeah, well, thank you. If there's no other questions from students, I'll end the session, but I'll give you a couple more seconds to think. All right. Well, if you do decide that you have questions, I'm sure Professor Celsor would be willing to answer any of your questions. You can send him an email. You can always reach out to the CCE office if you have questions. But yeah, thank you for attending the session, and thank you for hosting Professor Celsor.
All right. And thank you, Taylor. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Have a good
Everyone
day.
have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.